It is said that some places are protected not by walls, but by silence. The chapter opens in near darkness. A stone corridor stretches forward, narrowing with each slow step, as though guiding the body to release urgency. The walls are smooth, worn by time rather than touch, undecorated and patient. No carvings interrupt their surface. No symbols ask to be read. Dust drifts gently through the air, suspended like breath held too long. At the end of the passage stands a door. It has no name. No inscription marks its lintel. No seal bears a sigil of power. The stone is unbroken, unscarred, untouched by fire or blade. The opening question arrives softly, without demand. How does a place remain sacred when even its name has been erased? In forgotten corners of the earth, names were once considered acts of summoning. To name a thing was to invite it into use, into story, into possession. This doorway was spared that fate. Ancient records do not describe it directly. They curve away, growing uncertain. Maps bend their lines before reaching it. Texts speak around it, as though careful not to wake something resting. The narrative focus settles on this threshold, an unnamed pause in stone, believed to guard a chamber never entered, never violated. It was not sealed in response to danger. It was not hidden after catastrophe. From its beginning, it was meant to remain untouched. Some believe the builders understood something easily forgotten, that the sacred becomes fragile once it is fully known. The corridor itself feels like preparation. Each step slows the breath. Sound fades as if absorbed by the walls. Even thought seems to soften here, loosening its grip. The door does not threaten. It does not warn. It simply exists, calm and complete. Beneath the silence, the doorway becomes more than architecture. It becomes a gesture, an intentional pause placed inside history. Priests once taught that naming invited ownership, and ownership invited harm. To leave something unnamed was to leave it free. The chamber beyond was protected not by guards or curses, but by forgetting. Whispers tell us that the door was never locked. There was no mechanism to bar entry. What kept it closed was understanding. Those who came here felt no urge to pass through. Curiosity arrived, then rested. The door did not call to be opened. Where memory fades, reverence can remain. The chapter drifts gently through time. Empires rose beyond these walls, naming everything they encountered. Rivers were claimed, mountains were measured, cities demanded to be remembered. This doorway remained outside those impulses. It asked for nothing. Emotion moves from curiosity into reverent calm. The listener senses that nothing waits behind the door demanding discovery. No revelation presses against the stone. No forbidden power sleeps there. The silence itself feels complete, as if the chamber has already fulfilled its purpose simply by remaining closed. Some believe the space beyond holds knowledge too delicate to survive repetition. Others say it holds nothing at all, that emptiness itself was the intention. Perhaps the builders understood that not every space must contain meaning to be meaningful. Standing before the door, one does not feel excluded. There is no frustration, no sense of loss. Instead, there is relief. The pressure to know dissolves. The mind loosens its search. The body settles. This is not a door that keeps something from us. It is a door that gives something back. The chapter deepens into reflection. Modern histories are built on opening, uncovering, revealing. Progress is measured by access, but this place suggests another wisdom, that restraint can be an act of care, that silence can be more generous than explanation. Dust continues to gather at the base of the doorway. Light shifts subtly across the stone as hours pass. The door remains unchanged, unmarked by time's urgency. It does not wait to be discovered. It waits for nothing at all. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was meant to remain exactly as it is. As night settles deeper, the corridor grows darker. The door fades into shadow, not disappearing, but resting. The silence thickens, not heavy, but full. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some truths are safest when they remain unnamed, breathing quietly behind sealed stone. The chapter closes with the listener still standing before the threshold, uninvited yet untroubled. The door does not open, nothing is revealed, and nothing feels incomplete. Sleep approaches like that silence, not as an ending, but as a gentle closing that asks nothing more.
It is said that some journeys are meant to stop before they arrive. The chapter opens in dim, forgiving light. A staircase descends slowly into the earth, each step carved from stone and softened by time. The edges are rounded, not by haste or panic, but by patience. These steps were not meant to be rushed. They invite the body to slow, to feel weight shift carefully from foot to foot, to notice the quiet between movements. Dust rests in the corners of each stair, undisturbed. The air grows cooler as one descends, carrying the faint scent of stone and age. Above, the world feels distant already. Below, something waits. not in anticipation, but in stillness. The opening question drifts gently, like a thought allowed to linger without answer. What happens when a sacred space is never finished? At the bottom of the staircase, the steps simply end. There is no final platform, no threshold marked by ceremony. Instead, the last step stops short, leaving a subtle drop into a chamber below. A room spoken of only in fragments, hinted at in broken inscriptions and half-remembered accounts. It is said to lie beneath the city, beneath ritual, beneath intention itself. In forgotten corners of the earth, sacred spaces were often built to completion with great care, altars aligned, ceilings closed, symbols perfected. But this chamber was left deliberately unfinished. The builders stopped one step short, leaving the descent incomplete, suspended between arrival and refusal. Beneath the silence, the chamber reveals itself slowly. The space below is wide and circular, its walls gently curved inward. No altar stands at its center. No offering stone waits for hands. The floor is smooth, untouched by ceremony. Light reaches the chamber only faintly, filtered down the staircase like a memory losing clarity. Whispers tell us that the builders understood something rare, that completion carries a kind of finality, and finality can become a burden. To finish a sacred space was to define it. To leave it unfinished was to allow it to remain open. The narrative focus settles on this belief. Ancient builders believed that questions were as sacred as answers, and perhaps more enduring. The chamber beneath the last step was not meant to resolve anything. It was meant to hold uncertainty gently, without pressure to conclude. The walls seem to absorb sound. Even breath feels quieter here, as though the chamber itself encourages restraint. Words arrive softly, then dissolve. Silence does not echo, it rests. Emotion moves from wonder into soft melancholy. The listener senses a tenderness in the incompletion, a kindness in the refusal to finish. The chamber does not feel abandoned, it feels spared. Some believe rituals were planned for this place but never enacted. Others say no ritual was ever intended. The chamber was the ritual, an acknowledgement that not all sacred acts require completion to be meaningful. Where memory fades, humility can remain. Standing at the last step, one feels no frustration at being stopped short. The body understands. The pause feels intentional. To step down would feel like intrusion, not arrival. The builders, it is said, believed that every civilization needed a place where intention could rest without demand, a space that did not ask to be used, defined, or understood. The chamber beneath the last step was that place. Time passed above it. Streets filled and emptied. Temples rose and lowered their voices. Gates closed. Water withdrew. Maps turned blank. And all the while, the chamber remained unchanged, unused yet intact. Emotion deepens into quiet sorrow, not the sorrow of loss, but of recognition. The listener senses how rarely such spaces exist now, how often the modern world demands completion, explanation, answers. This chamber stands as a gentle refusal. Perhaps this was the builder's final teaching, that incompletion is not failure, that stopping short can be an act of wisdom, that not every descent must end in arrival. The chapter drifts into reflection. Sacred architecture elsewhere sought permanence. This chamber sought permission to remain unresolved. It trusted that meaning did not require closure to endure. Dust continues to settle softly on the chamber floor. No footsteps disturb it. No hands reach down. The air remains cool, even, calm. Emotion settles into acceptance. The listener feels invited not to finish every thought, not to resolve every question, to allow some things to remain open, breathing quietly beneath awareness. As time deepens, white fades further. The chamber grows darker, not ominous, but restful. The last step remains exactly where it was placed, one step above completion. Perhaps it was never meant to be finished. Perhaps that was the point. The chapter closes with the listener still standing on the final step, suspended between movement and rest. The chamber below does not call. It waits without waiting. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some spaces exist not to be entered, but to remind us that it is enough to stop. Sleep approaches like that pause, unfinished, gentle, and kind, a descent that ends not in arrival, but in rest.
It is said that long before words were trusted, stone learned how to listen. The chapter opens in a circular chamber, carved deep into the earth. No doorway announces itself loudly. The entrance curves gently inward, guiding the body into a space shaped not for gathering crowds, but for holding quiet. The walls are smooth and bowed, as if pressed slowly by centuries of intention. Light enters from a single opening above, falling softly and never directly, as though even the sun has learned restraint here. The opening question arrives like a breath released slowly. Can architecture be shaped to hear rather than speak? In forgotten corners of the earth, builders understood sound as a living thing. They believed words carried weight, and echoes could disturb what should remain at rest. This chamber was designed not to amplify voices, but to soften them. Sound enters and dissolves, absorbed gently by curved stone. Even footsteps feel quieter here,
as if the ground itself asks for care. The narrative focus settles on the walls. They are not decorated. No carvings demand attention. No symbols compete for meaning. Instead, the stone curves inward, like cupped hands or listening shells turned toward the center. Each surface is shaped with patience, guiding sound away from sharp return. Voices spoken here were never meant to travel far. They were meant to arrive and then rest. Whispers tell us this chamber was used sparingly. It was not a place for proclamation or ceremony. It was entered only when words felt too heavy to carry elsewhere. Those who came here lowered their voices instinctively, not out of fear, but respect. Beneath the silence, the chamber feels alive, not with presence, but with attention. Some believe the walls were meant to hold confessions, never spoken aloud. Others say they absorbed questions whispered only once, never repeated. The chamber did not answer. It listened. That was enough. Emotion moves from curiosity into inward calm. The listener senses relief in the absence of echo. Here, nothing is thrown back at the speaker. Nothing returns louder or distorted. Words fade naturally, like breath leaving the body. Where memory fades, gentleness can remain. The builders believed that too much sound hardened thought, that constant repetition turned meaning into noise. This chamber offered another way, a place where speech could soften before disappearing. Standing within the space, one feels no urge to speak at all. Silence does not feel empty here. It feels attentive, as if the walls themselves are present, patient, and kind. Time passed above this chamber. Cities expanded. Markets grew louder. Declarations were shouted in open halls. But beneath it all, this space remained unchanged, holding silence without judgment. Emotion deepens into soft melancholy. The listener senses how rare such spaces have become, places that do not demand expression, places that allow words to arrive and then release them without record. Perhaps this was the chamber's greatest purpose, to remind people that not everything needs to be heard by others to be real. The chapter drifts into reflection. Modern spaces amplify. They project. They repeat. This chamber absorbed. It trusted that what mattered would not be lost by being quiet. Dust gathers evenly along the curved walls. Light shifts slowly across stone. No voices disturb the balance. The chamber does not feel abandoned. It feels complete. Emotion settles into peace. The listener feels invited to lay down unnecessary words, to let thoughts arrive and dissolve without effort, to trust that silence can hold more than sound ever could. As time deepens, even the faint light from above dims. The chamber grows darker, but not closed. It remains open, listening without expectation. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some truths arrive only when the world grows quiet enough to receive them. The chapter closes without instruction. The walls remain curved inward, holding nothing, keeping nothing, yet offering a presence that feels profoundly gentle. Sleep approaches like that silence, soft, absorbing, and kind, a space where nothing needs to be said, and everything is allowed to rest.
It is said that the most powerful closures leave no signature behind. The chapter opens at dawn, when light is at its most forgiving. A stone wall rises gently from the earth, smooth and continuous, as though grown rather than built. At its center rests a seal, perfectly fitted, unbroken, untouched by time. There are no markings to explain it, no crest pressed into the stone, no name etched along its edge. The opening question drifts softly, like mist over still ground. Who seals a sacred place without leaving a sign? In forgotten corners of the earth, seals were declarations. Kings pressed them into wax. Priests carved them into doors. Authority announced itself through symbols, through permanence. But this seal bears nothing. It does not claim power. It does not threaten consequence. It simply rests where it was placed, quiet and complete. The narrative focus settles on this absence of ownership. Ancient fragments suggest the seal was not placed by decree. No single hand was responsible. No moment of command marked its arrival. Instead, it is said the seal appeared because it was understood. The people did not need instruction. They did not need ceremony. They recognized a shared moment of closure and acted together without record. Beneath the silence, the seal feels gentle. It does not resist entry with force. It does not warn of danger beyond. It simply closes the space with care, like a book returned to a shelf, not because it is finished, but because it has been read enough. Some believe the seal was laid during a season of listening. The world beyond had grown loud. Decisions arrived too quickly. Knowledge moved faster than wisdom.
The sacred spaces, once places of rest, had begun to echo with urgency. The seal was an answer, not of fear, but of protection. Where memory fades, agreement can remain. Emotion moves from curiosity into calm recognition. The listener senses the quiet strength of collective restraint. No ruler needed to decide. No authority needed to enforce. The seal exists because everyone knew it was time. Standing before it, one does not feel barred. There is no frustration, no sense of denial. The seal does not provoke desire, it dissolves it. The stone fits so naturally into the wall that it feels as though the space itself asked to be closed. The chapter drifts gently into reflection. Modern endings are loud. They demand acknowledgement. This one passed without announcement. The seal did not mark an end, it marked a pause. Perhaps that is why it has endured. Time passed above it. Cities shifted. Borders moved. Empires rose and softened. The seal remained unchanged, not because it was guarded, but because it was respected. No hand reached for it. No tool tested its strength. Emotion deepens into quiet reverence. The listener senses how rare such shared understanding is. Closure without conflict. Agreement without force. The seal feels like a promise kept rather than a door locked. Some whisper that the seal covers nothing extraordinary. Others believe it protects something too ordinary to be exploited. Silence itself. Either way, the seal does not reveal its purpose. It does not need to. Dust gathers gently along its edge. Light shifts across its surface throughout the day. The stone does not crack. It does not weaken. It does not assert. It rests. The chapter moves toward stillness. The seal stands as a reminder that not every act requires authorship, that some of the most meaningful choices are those made together, quietly, without leaving a trace. Perhaps this was the builder's intention all along, to create a closure that belonged to no one, and therefore to everyone. As evening approaches, shadows soften. The seal blends further into the wall, indistinguishable from what surrounds it. The boundary disappears into wholeness. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some endings matter most when no one claims to have made them. The chapter closes with the seal unmoving beneath fading light. It does not guard, it does not warn. It simply remains, complete, unclaimed, and at peace. Sleep approaches like that seal, not forced, not commanded, but arriving gently when it is time.
It is said that not all hidden things are dangerous. The chapter opens in a wide, low chamber beneath the earth, where the ceiling curves gently and the air feels cool and steady. There are no warning symbols carved into the stone. No guardians stand watch. No barriers signal danger. The space feels calm, almost welcoming, as though concealment here was never meant to inspire fear. A single shaft of softened light falls from above, touching the floor briefly before fading again. Dust drifts slowly, undisturbed. The opening question arrives like a quiet reassurance. What kind of knowledge needs no guard? In forgotten corners of the earth, what was hidden was often what was feared. Cursed objects, forbidden truths, dangerous power. But this chamber was different. Ancient accounts describe it without urgency. No warnings accompany its mention. No tales of punishments surround its memory. Instead, there is gentleness in the way it is remembered, as though the act of hiding was an expression of care. The narrative focus settles on this distinction. Whispers tell us that what was concealed here was never meant to be protected from people, but protected for them. The chamber held knowledge too delicate to survive exposure, truths that softened with repetition, meanings that dissolved when spoken too loudly or too often. This was not a place of secrets kept through threat. It was a place of understanding kept through trust. Beneath the silence, the chamber feels unburdened. The walls do not press inward. The floor bears no marks of ritual or urgency. Nothing here feels forbidden. It simply feels complete. Some believe the chamber once held teachings meant to be experienced only briefly, insights that arrived once and did not need to return. Others say it held nothing tangible at all, only space, a pause in the world where people could lay down the weight of knowing too much. Emotion moves from intrigue into tenderness. The listener senses a kindness behind the concealment. This was not knowledge withheld out of control or dominance. It was set aside gently, like a flame shielded from wind so it could burn out naturally. Where memory fades, compassion can remain. Those who knew of the chamber did not speak of it often, not because they were forbidden, but because they felt no need. The absence of explanation did not trouble them.
They trusted that what mattered would surface when it was ready, and sink back when it was not. Standing within the chamber now, one feels no urgency to search its corners. The space does not invite examination. It invites rest. Breath slows. Thoughts loosen their grip. The chapter drifts into reflection. Modern cultures fear hidden things. They equate concealment with threat. This chamber suggests another way, that hiding can be an act of gentleness, not control. Perhaps the builders understood that some truths cannot be owned without being damaged, that constant access can wear away meaning. To hide something without fear is to acknowledge its fragility. Emotion deepens into quiet acceptance. The listener senses relief in the absence of demand. There is nothing here to uncover, nothing to prove, nothing to take away. Light shifts subtly across the chamber floor as time passes. The space remains unchanged. No one waits beyond its walls. No one listens for footsteps. The chapter moves toward stillness. The chamber does not resist discovery because it does not require it. Its purpose was fulfilled simply by existing. Perhaps this was its greatest lesson, that knowledge does not always need preservation, that some understanding is complete once it has been lived. As darkness settles fully, the chamber fades from view. It does not vanish, it rests. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some things are hidden not because they are dangerous, but because they are gentle enough to be broken by too much light. The chapter closes without revelation. The listener is left with calm rather than answers, with trust rather than certainty. Sleep arrives like that chamber, quiet, unguarded, and kind, a place where nothing is demanded, and everything is allowed to fade softly.
It is said that not all absences are accidents. The chapter opens with parchment spread across a stone table beneath low, wavering light. The map is old, its edges softened by touch, its surface marked with careful lines, rivers traced like veins, mountains rising in delicate ink, coastlines shaped by patient hands. And yet, at its center, something is missing. The lines stop, not abruptly, but gently, as though the hand that drew them simply chose to lift away. The opening question drifts softly into the quiet. Why would a map refuse to finish what it began? In forgotten corners of the earth, maps were once acts of devotion. To draw the land was to honor it, to acknowledge its presence in the world of memory. But this map behaves differently. It does not rush to define. It does not claim completeness. Instead, it turns away from a particular place, leaving a wide, untouched space where ink never settled. The narrative focus rests on this omission. Ancient records suggest the mapmakers knew exactly what lay beyond the final line. This was not ignorance, it was intention. Other maps from the same period show precision and care, naming even the smallest streams. Yet each one, without exception, avoids this same region. Different hands, different times, always the same absence. Whispers tell us the mapmakers believed that drawing a place invited the world to approach it. Lines became pathways, names became permission. To leave a place unmarked was to protect it from attention. Beneath the silence, the blank space begins to feel deliberate, almost sacred. Emotion moves from curiosity into quiet unease, softened by reverence. The listener senses that this was not fear of the unknown, but respect for it. The blank does not feel empty, it feels guarded, not by walls, but by restraint. Where memory fades, boundaries can remain. Some believe the mapmakers were instructed to omit the place. Others say no instruction was needed. The choice passed naturally between generations, understood without explanation. The blank space became tradition rather than rule. Standing before the map, one feels no urge to fill in the missing lines. The eye accepts the absence easily. The surrounding detail seems complete without it. The blank becomes a resting place for attention, a pause amid information. The chapter drifts into reflection. Modern maps seek totality, they leave no corner unnamed. But this map suggests another wisdom, that not every place must be made accessible, and not every truth must be pursued. Perhaps the builders of the sealed chamber understood this. The map did not hide the place because it was dangerous, it hid it because it was finished. To mark it again would have been unnecessary. Emotion deepens into calm acceptance. The listener senses the relief of not knowing everything, of allowing some spaces to remain beyond reach. The blank space feels like permission, to stop searching, to trust that not all journeys require destinations. Light shifts across the parchment as hours pass. The ink remains steady, the blank remains untouched. Dust settles gently along the edges, never crossing into the empty space. The map does not apologize for what it withholds, it does not explain itself. It simply turns away, offering silence where certainty might have been expected. Perhaps this was the map's final lesson, that guidance does not always mean direction, sometimes it means restraint. As night deepens, the map is rolled carefully and stored away. The blank disappears inside, preserved not by secrecy but by respect. It travels quietly through time, unremarked by those who seek answers everywhere. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some places remain whole only when they are allowed to stay unnamed.
The chapter closes with the map at rest, its blank heart intact. Nothing calls from the unmarked space, nothing is lost by its absence. Sleep arrives like that blankness, soft, uninsistent, and kind, a turning away from certainty and a return to rest.
It is said that the greatest choice is sometimes the one that leaves no trace. The chapter opens at the edge of a clearing where stone meets shadow. The air is cool and still. Ahead, the sealed place rests quietly, its entrance visible, unobstructed, and calm. No debris blocks the way. No warning marks stain the stone. The path leading toward it is smooth, as though many feet once approached, and then stopped. The opening question arrives gently, without insistence. Why would people turn away from a door they were free to open? In forgotten corners of the earth, sacred spaces were often guarded by fear. Curses were carved into thresholds. Threats were whispered to keep the unworthy away. But here, there is none of that. The chamber stands open to approach, yet untouched by entry. Those who came near did not retreat in panic. They simply chose not to step forward. The narrative focus settles on this decision. Whispers tell us that travelers reached this place guided by curiosity, not command. They felt no resistance in the air, no pressure in the stone. And yet, as they stood before the threshold, something softened within them. The desire to cross faded, replaced by an unexpected calm. Beneath the silence, the choice not to enter feels deliberate, even kind. Some believe the chamber revealed itself only to those who no longer needed it, that the moment one felt ready to open the door was precisely the moment it was no longer necessary. Others say the place taught a quieter lesson, that restraint is also a form of wisdom. Emotion moves from curiosity into gentle trust. The listener senses the relief of choosing not to know, not to claim, not to take. The door does not reject, it releases. Where memory fades, humility can remain. Accounts suggest that those who turned away did not feel regret. They carried no sense of loss with them. Instead, they felt lighter, as though something unnecessary had been set down. The chamber gave them nothing, yet they left with more. Time passed. Others came. Each arrived with questions, each left without answers, and still the place remained intact. Emotion deepens into quiet reverence. The listener senses how rare such a choice is, to stop at the edge of knowing, to trust that not everything needs to be entered to be understood. Standing before the threshold now, one feels no pull forward. The stone does not invite. It does not challenge. It simply rests, allowing the visitor to decide. The chapter drifts into reflection. Modern cultures celebrate access. Doors are meant to open. Knowledge is meant to be taken. This place suggests another way, that some wisdom arrives through restraint, and that dignity can exist without possession. Dust gathers softly at the threshold, undisturbed by crossing feet. Light shifts across the stone, marking time without urgency. The door remains as it always has, available yet untouched. Perhaps this was the chamber's true purpose, not to be entered, but to offer a moment of choice, to allow people to feel the freedom of turning away. As evening approaches, shadows lengthen. The threshold blends into darkness, not disappearing, but resting. The clearing grows quiet again. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some doors exist not to be opened, but to remind us that we are free to stop. The chapter closes with the listener standing at that edge. No command given, no rule imposed. The choice remains gentle and complete. Sleep arrives like that moment, a quiet decision to step back from effort, to leave questions unanswered, and to rest without crossing further. It is said that some promises are never meant to be fulfilled, only held. The chapter opens in deep stillness. Night has settled fully over the land, and beneath layers of earth and stone, the chamber remains exactly as it has always been. No light enters it now. No footsteps approach. Yet the space does not feel empty. It feels expectant, not with anticipation, but with quiet assurance. The opening question arrives softly, like a thought that does not need resolution. What if a sacred place exists not for the present, but for a future that may never come? In forgotten corners of the earth, promises were often carved into stone, oaths sworn aloud, contracts sealed, prophecies inscribed to be fulfilled. But this chamber was different. It carried no inscription, no declaration of purpose. Its promise was not written. It was implied. The narrative focus settles on the idea of the chamber as an offering to time itself. Ancient fragments suggest the builders believed every civilization needed to leave something unfinished, not as failure, but as trust. A promise that the world would continue, whether or not anyone returned to claim it. The chamber beneath the last step was that promise, a space left open for those who might need it, even if no one ever did. Beneath the silence, the chamber feels patient.
It does not wait in the way people wait. There is no tension here, no expectation. The promise it holds is gentle, that something untouched can remain intact across generations, unaltered by urgency or use. Emotion moves from curiosity into quiet hope. The listener senses comfort in the idea that not everything must be consumed by the present moment, that some things can be left behind without being abandoned. Where memory fades, intention can endure. Some believe the chamber was meant for a time of return, when the world above grew too loud, too hurried, too certain. Others believe it was never meant to be entered at all. The promise was not access, but restraint. The act of leaving something untouched was itself the fulfillment. Standing near the unseen space, one feels no impatience. The promise does not pull at the future. It rests easily within the present, unconcerned with whether it is ever acknowledged. The chapter drifts into reflection. Modern cultures fear unused space. They rush to define purpose, to extract value, to complete every gesture. This chamber suggests another rhythm, that promise does not require fulfillment to be meaningful. Emotion deepens into calm reassurance. The listener senses that even if no one ever enters the chamber again, its existence still matters. It has already done what it was meant to do. Time passes without marking the space. Seasons change above. Civilizations rise and dissolve. The chamber remains untouched, holding nothing but possibility. Perhaps this was the builder's quiet gift to the future. Not instructions, not warnings, but trust. Trust that someone, somewhere, might understand the value of leaving something whole. As darkness deepens further, the chamber fades fully from perception, yet its presence lingers, not as a mystery demanding attention, but as a certainty that does not require proof. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some promises are kept not by being fulfilled, by being left exactly as they are. The chapter closes with the chamber resting beneath time, unopened, unnamed, and complete. The promise remains unclaimed, and nothing is lost because of it. Sleep approaches like that promise, soft, unspoken, and kind, a knowing that does not ask for action, only rest.
It is said that silence can survive what stone cannot. The chapter opens far above the sealed chamber, where the city once breathed. Night settles over broken rooftops and softened walls, now barely distinguishable from the earth that holds them. Wind moves gently through open spaces, where streets once guided footsteps. No voices answer it. No echoes return. And yet, the silence here feels older than the ruins themselves. The opening question arrives slowly, like a memory surfacing without effort. How does silence remain when a city is gone? In forgotten corners of the earth, cities often announce their endings loudly. Walls fall, towers burn, names are erased by force. But this place did not collapse. It thinned, it softened. Life withdrew without resistance, leaving behind structures that did not mourn their emptiness. The narrative focus rests not on what was lost, but on what endured. Long after the people left, after rituals ended and doors were sealed, something remained behind. Not a building, not an object, but an atmosphere. The silence that once lived only inside sacred chambers rose upward and spread across the city. It settled into streets, courtyards, rooftops. It outlived the architecture that once contained it. Beneath the silence, the ruins do not feel abandoned. They feel concluded. Some believe the city was designed with this ending in mind, that its builders understood impermanence deeply. Stone was shaped to last, yes, but not forever. Silence, they believed, have last longer. It required no maintenance, no defense. It did not erode. Emotion moves from wonder into deep calm. The listener senses how rare it is for something intangible to endure beyond what was built to survive. The city did not leave behind its power, its wealth, or its name. It left behind quiet. Where memory fades, presence can remain. As time passed, the silence changed shape. At first, it was the quiet of absence. No markets, no bells, no voices at dusk. Later, it became something deeper. A stillness that did not feel empty, but full. The land itself seemed to listen. Travelers who crossed the ruins centuries later spoke of the feeling. They could not name it. They said the place felt finished, that nothing there asked to be restored, that even curiosity softened upon arrival. Emotion deepens into reverent melancholy. The listener senses that the silence was not accidental. It was cultivated, protected, allowed to spread once the city no longer needed walls to hold it. Perhaps this was the city's final form, not stone and street, but quiet. The chapter drifts into reflection. Modern civilizations strive to be remembered through monuments, through records, through noise. This city chose another path. It allowed silence to become its legacy. Dust gathers evenly on fallen stones. Wind moves without resistance.
Stars rise and fall above the ruins, unchanged by what once stood below. The silence adapts, but it does not leave. Emotion settles into acceptance. The listener feels comfort in the idea that not all endings need markers, that some places can conclude without demanding remembrance. Standing among the ruins now, one does not feel the urge to speak. Words feel unnecessary. The silence does not press, it holds. Perhaps this was the builders' quiet hope, that when everything else had returned to Earth, the silence they shaped would remain, unbroken by time. The chapter moves gently toward its close. Night deepens. The ruins fade further into shadow. The silence grows softer, not heavier, like breath slowing before sleep. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some cities endure not through what they leave behind, but through what they allow to remain. The chapter closes with the city fully surrendered to stillness. Nothing stirs, nothing calls out. The silence rests where streets once ran, outliving walls, outliving memory. Sleep arrives like that silence, unannounced, complete, and kind. The final shape a city takes when it has finished becoming itself.
It is said that some things endure without expectation. The final chapter opens in the present moment. Wind moves gently across the land where the city once stood, shaping the surface again and again into patterns that do not remember what lies beneath. From above, there is little to see, only dunes like a breath barely felt. When everything has faded, what still waits? In forgotten corners of the earth, waiting is often imagined as tension, anticipation stretched thin, longing for return. But this place does not wait in that way. Nothing beneath the sand hopes to be uncovered. Nothing listens for footsteps. The chamber, the corridors, the sealed spaces exist without desire. They remain not because they expect discovery, but because they are complete. The narrative focus gathers all that has come before. The unnamed door still stands in darkness, content in its refusal. The chamber beneath the last step remains unfinished, resting in its pause. The listening walls still hold silence without echo. The seal placed by no one remains unclaimed. What was hidden without fear remains gentle. The map still turns away. Those who chose not to enter remain at peace. The chamber as promise remains intact. The silence still outlives the city. Nothing has changed, and that is the meaning. Beneath the silence, the city is not dormant in the way runes sleep. It is settled. There is no unfinished business in its stone, no unanswered demand. Time passes over it, not through it. Emotion moves from reflection into deep stillness. The listener senses the rare comfort of something that does not require attention to endure. The city beneath the sand does not fear forgetting. It has already let go. Where memory fades, presence can remain without effort. Some believe that ancient builders understood a truth modern worlds struggle to accept, that meaning does not depend on permanence, that to exist fully for a time is enough, that to withdraw gently is not erasure, but completion. Standing here now, one feels no urge to dig. The land does not invite disturbance. The imagination does not race toward revelation. Instead, there is trust. Trust that what remains does not need to be known to be whole. The chapter drifts into quiet contemplation. What waits beneath the sand is not history asking to be recovered. It is silence continuing its work. The city does not want to return. It does not call out through myth or legend. It simply is. Emotion settles into peace deeper than curiosity. The listener senses release from the need to uncover, explain, or preserve. The city beneath the dunes offers permission to let some things remain exactly where they are. Stars rise above the land, as they always have. Wind continues its gentle shaping. Nothing beneath reacts, nothing responds, and yet everything feels held. Perhaps this is what still waits. Not revelation, not treasure, not knowledge, but rest itself. A reminder that not all histories are meant to awaken again. The chapter moves slowly toward its close. The present moment expands. Breath slows. Thought loosens. The world above grows quiet enough to match the world below. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And some places remain whole not because they are remembered, but because they are allowed to remain. The final image settles gently. Dunes under stars, silence beneath stone, time moving on without disturbance. The city waits without waiting. It has nothing left to give, and nothing left to take. Sleep arrives like that understanding, soft, unresolved, and kind, a letting go of questions, and a resting without need for return.